I have a difficult time accepting a reality that, it's ceded lands and it's lands that, are taken away from, our Hawaiian people.
A few days after Hawaii State Senator Lorraine Inouye made these statements, a letter was sent to the Hawaii State Senate. Kalahui Hawaii described the senator's statements as hate speech directed towards Native Hawaiians and asked the Hawaii State Senate to take action against the senator. They specifically asked the Senate to formally reprimand Senator Inouye, ask her to issue a public written apology, and to remove the state senator from her chair position on the Water and Land Committee and replace her with someone more familiar with the ceded lands history and Native Hawaiian special relationship to these lands. But Senator Inouye's comments should be understood in a much broader context. A few days earlier, another politician said,
"We came here and created a blank slate. We birthed a nation from nothing. I mean, there was nothing here. I mean, yes, we have Native Americans, but candidly, that there isn't much Native American culture in American culture. It was born of the people who came here to live as they ought to live and have the freedom to do so."
While Lorraine Inouye and Rick Santorum discussed different issues specifically, in general, both of their statements were about indigenous or native peoples, and their narratives relied on forgetting, ignoring, or erasing the fact that the native indigenous people are still here despite histories of treaty violations, land dispossessions, and cultural assimilation. For her narrative to work, the state senator wants you to ignore the facts that as recent as 1993, the United States Congress passed and President Bill Clinton signed a resolution recognizing the United States' role in the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy and that Native Hawaiians have unrelinquished claims. In addition, this narrative also requires us to ignore the Hawaii Supreme Court's 2008 decision in Office of Hawaiian Affairs v. Housing and Community Development Corporation of Hawaii that recognized the state of Hawaii has a fiduciary duty to preserve the ceded lands until such time as the unrelinquished claims of the Native Hawaiians have been resolved. The state's highest court was careful to explain that both the apology resolution and perhaps more importantly related state legislation gave rise to this duty. Lorraine Inouye's statements were made while discussing a proposed law introduced during the 2021 Hawaii legislative session that would affect ceded lands. Several other House and Senate bills were introduced also covering the issue of ceded lands. As a reminder, both the United States and the State of Hawaii governments have recognized Native Hawaiians' unrelinquished land claims. An interesting point with these ceded lands bills, however, is the international human rights issues involved. The governments of the world recognized, through passage of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, that indigenous peoples have rights to land. If you're wondering what the relevance of international human rights concerns is to Native Hawaiians' claims to the ceded lands, then let's take a quick look at another Pacific indigenous people also under the control and jurisdiction of the United States, the Chamorro people of Guam. In January 2021, 3 United Nations Special Rapporteurs expressed to the United States government their serious concern over the absence of adequate consultation with the Chamorro people and threats to indigenous lands, resources, environmental, and cultural rights. The Special Rapporteurs also noted the Chamorro people have not provided their free, prior, and informed consent in connection with the ongoing expansion of the U.S. military bases. In their annex, the Special Rapporteurs informed the U.S. that they also looked to the government's obligations under binding international human rights treaties, including the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The Special Rapporteurs also explained that the International Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination has consistently called upon the United States to guarantee in law and in practice the right of indigenous peoples to effective participation in public life and in decisions that affect them based on their free, prior, and informed consent. Hawaii's elected legislative politicians received an overwhelming number of testimonies opposing these ceded lands bills.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Wayne Tanaka for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. You have a written testimony in opposition. We oppose this bill because it will result in public and largely ceded lands being placed in private hands for up to a century or longer. And until Native Hawaiian claims are resolved, we have no choice but to oppose these kinds of proposals. Unless there's some kind of mechanism that can recognize and protect, Native Hawaiians' claims.
I'm strongly opposed to House Bill 499.
Nearly 100 testimonies have come in opposition to this measure, and less than 10 in support. And those that are in support are those who will directly benefit financially from this measure.
Members, there are 80 in opposition and 7 in support.
Public testimony also raised the absence of Native Hawaiians' free, prior, and informed consent as an issue with the bill as a potential human rights violation. Despite public testimony against HB 499, they passed it anyway.
Okay, if I may, Senator, to go back to House Bill 499, recommendation of the House and Senate managers to pass with amendments. CD1, Tarnas, Chair Tarnas voted aye. Chair Johansson.
Aye.
Chair Cullen.
Aye.
And Representative McDermott is excused. May I take the vote for the Senate?
Yes, please.
Chair Inouye.
Aye.
Chair Keith Agaron.
Does this have a fiscal referral? Is that what I'm sitting here for? I mean, I'm for it.
This is HB 499, so we're asking for your support for our recommendation on 499.
And we got clearance from WHAM and Finn.
And the amendment is just to change it to upon approval.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
That's an aye then.
So aye. Delayed aye, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. The recommendation is adopted.
If you believe in protecting Native Hawaiians' human rights, call Governor David Ige at 808-586-0034 and let his office know that you oppose House Bill 499 and want him to veto it. Also, go to bit.ly/govcomments and fill out the form to let Governor Ige know that you oppose House Bill or HB 499 and want him to veto it.